Welcome to the Sarah Finkelstein Show, where the next 10 minutes can change your life. Also on Spotify, SoundCloud, and iHeartRadio. Here's Sarah.
Hi. Today's topic is a very, very important one. And it is about why do you need a long-term care plan now more than ever? A number of years ago, I wrote an article that appeared in our local paper, the Palm Beach Post. It happened to have come out around Halloween, which is why the article was called Long-Term Care, Trick or Treat. And the article was a story about my husband's grandparents, who at the time were living in a lovely assisted living community in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. They had a very nice 2-bedroom apartment. They had lots of activities. They had dinners with, believe it or not, in an assisted living community, they had a liquor bar so that the residents could enjoy drinks with their dinner. And have you noticed, I know I've noticed in my local area, but I'm just wondering where you are. Have you noticed a lot of assisted living communities cropping up? And if you have, then you know that this is a growing demand. So how many assisted living communities have you noticed that are being built in your surrounding geographic area? And I'm just curious if you've ever been to one of these communities. By the way, I strongly urge you, if you've never been to one, go to one of these communities. They will be happy to give you a tour of the place, of their amenities. They'll even show you a few different apartment styles and sizes. And they will probably even treat you to lunch. Now, why am I recommending that you do this, even though you may not have a need for this right now, and maybe nobody in your family has a need for this right now? Well, it's a good idea to get familiar with how they are, how they run, what they offer, so that when the time may come down the road that you or a loved one might need to utilize these communities, you'll already be somewhat familiar with them. So I strongly urge you to do that. And by the way, the newest places that open up would love for you to go and tour their place. Okay, so what are the reasons that I am suggesting that now is important more than ever for you to get a long-term care plan in place? Okay, let's go. So reason number one has to do with inflation. We are currently at the highest inflation rate that we've had in over 40 years. The inflation rate is running approximately 8%. And let's stick to that. So utilizing the rule of 72, we can project forward and figure out how much money we're going to need for long-term care. And by the way, the statistics are as follows for long-term care. 2 out of 3 people over the age of 65 will need long-term care at some point. Some for a short period of time, and others potentially for years, 5, 10, or 15 years. So this is why this is so important. So let's assume we are currently in 2022, and let's just say that it runs $50,000 a year for having an aide come into your home or living in an assisted living community. Now, I know that there are differences in pricing depending upon where you live in the country, depending upon the particular community, also depending upon one's particular levels of need. But let's just stick with that number. Let's just say it's $50,000 a year right now in 2022. Utilizing the rule of 72, we know that every 9 years, that cost will double. Now, how did I do that? The rule of 72 is very, very simple. You just take the interest rate or the inflation rate in this case, divide it into 72, and it tells you how many years before you need twice as much money to cover those charges. So in 9 years, you'll need $100,000. It'll double. So for example, in 2031, that $50,000 today will need to be $100,000 in 2031. In 2040, we will need $200,000. It doubles again. In 2049, it doubles again at the inflation rate of 8%. So now we will need $400,000 a year to cover that long-term care expense if we are paying for it ourselves out of our own pocket. So let's put this into perspective. Let's say that you are 50 years old today. At your age 77, you will need $400,000 to cover long-term care. Now, let's say you don't need long-term care in your 70s. Let's say it doesn't happen until you're in your 80s. Let's say, for example, you're 86 years old. Now you need $800,000 a year to cover long-term care. If you need it for 3 years, which is what they say the average long-term care claim is, you will need $2.4 million. If you need it for 4 years, as many females do, then your long-term care expense is $3.2 million. So those numbers are astronomical. Yes, I know, I agree. But if you choose to pass on the risk to an insurance carrier, it could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars. It all boils down to planning. Again, Benjamin Franklin said, people don't plan to fail. They just fail to plan. So the first reason why it's so important now is because of inflation. Inflation is running very high. Let's take a look at another reason. Family caregivers. A lot of times people don't have a plan in place. They may not have the funds to pay for it out of pocket. So what do? They rely on family, their children, their grandchildren, their siblings, or even a dear friend. And I want you to know that caregiver stress is a real thing, and it can be very detrimental. It has a toll on the caregiver's emotional, physical, and financial consequences. So these are the things that we need to plan for. And if you don't have a plan in place and your family doesn't have a plan in place, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to you? What's going to happen to your loved ones that need to make adjustments in their lives to provide the care for you because they love you, right? That's what family is all about. And what's going to happen to your retirement nest egg if you need to use those funds to pay for the care of a loved one? Will you be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor all the years that you've worked, that you've saved, that you've accumulated for your golden years? Or will that money get used up to pay for your loved ones' long-term care needs? Please give this some real serious thought. And I strongly urge you to please have these conversations with your loved ones, your family, because long-term care is, I call it, a family affair. It's very important to have these conversations. And granted, we really don't want to have these conversations. They can be unpleasant. We don't want to think about it. But if we don't plan for it, then what are we planning for? We're planning for a potential crisis down the road. May not happen tomorrow, but it could be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or even longer. But at some point, if we don't have a plan in place, we are planning to have a crisis. So have these conversations with your loved ones. Another reason why it's important now is longevity. People are living longer than ever before. My husband's grandmother is currently 99, and she's living in independent living community. Her oldest sister lived to be 106, and a lot of the residents in her community are over the age of 90. Some are even over the age of 100. So yes, it is possible that you and your loved ones will make it beyond 100. And that requires appropriate planning. Another suggestion that I have is have a plan. A plan is better than no plan. And a plan, some coverage is better than no coverage, right? Some plan is better than no plan at all. Start today. Have these very, very important and potentially difficult conversations with your family members. You know, when you go to a hotel, on the back of the door, there's an evacuation route in the event of, God forbid, a fire. You know where to go. Well, what is your plan when your life needs change? So please, I urge you to look into these plans. And if you don't have a financial professional or a long-term care planning specialist, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to have these conversations with you to help you get on the right track. And if you wish, please request our free report about long-term care.
Knowledge is power, but only when you implement what you've learned to your own benefit. Tune in next time for even more powerful tips on The Sarah Finkelstein Show.